In modern motorsport, data is basically God.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if you walk into any factory paddock today, you are just going to see engineers huddled over laptops, right?
Yeah, just staring at telemetry screens.
Exactly. Spending millions of dollars to shave off like a single millisecond of throttle lag using digital injection. It's an arms race of algorithms.
It really is.
Okay.
The whole industry operates on this idea that the machine is perfect and the human is just...
The variable that needs managing.
Right, the human is the error.
So what happens when a generational genius decides that a computer's quote-unquote perfection is actually the exact thing making him slower?
Well, I mean, it's the ultimate heresy in the modern paddock.
True.
To look at the absolute cutting edge of electronic fuel injection, telemetry, and mathematical precision and just say, no, this is dulling my edge.
Yeah, I don't want this.
Exactly. It goes against everything the industry has spent the last decade building.
And if you're listening to this deep dive, and you've been following trials riding for the last 10 years, you already know exactly who we're talking about.
You know his journey.
Right, because it has been the most baffling, dramatic, and intensely debated arc in the sport. So today, we are unpacking the unseen telemetry and, honestly, the raw psychology behind a monumental shift that just happened days ago.
March 20, 2026.
Yes, March 20, 2026. We are looking at the Basque genius himself, Jaime Busto.
And his inevitable homecoming to the Beta Factory team.
And this isn't just about a rider switching leathers, is it?
Oh no, not at all. What we are looking at today is the culmination of a 7-year odyssey.
A full 7 years of just wandering.
Right. It's a profound exploration of human intuition, what the source text brilliantly calls the Anima, or the soul.
The Anima going to war against data-driven technology.
Exactly. It is about a rider tearing himself away from everything the sport considers optimal to rediscover his original style.
And to really grasp the emotional weight of this March 2026 homecoming, we can't just look at the Beta contract. We have to understand the wilderness he's been wandering through.
We have to rewind the clock.
Right, back to 2015. Because to understand why Jaime Busto spent 7 years searching for the perfect machine, you have to understand why he walked away from the most dominant empire in trials history.
The Repsol Honda Team.
Yes. So break that era down for us.
Well, from roughly 2015 to 2018, Jaime was inside the Repsol Honda Forge. And honestly, Forge is the only appropriate word for it.
It wasn't just a regular team environment.
No, it was highly disciplined, rigorous. He was riding alongside the absolute champion of the sport.
The king himself.
Right. And the goal there was to take Jaime's raw, unbelievable talent and hammer it into the shape of a flawless top-tier professional.
And the anvil they used for that forging was the 4-stroke machine.
Exactly, the 4-stroke.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics of this, because I think this is where the philosophy of the rider really clashes with the physics of the bike.
It's the core of the conflict.
Because in trials, where you are literally trying to balance a 200-pound motorcycle on, like a wet, algae-covered boulder 15 feet in the air.
Which is terrifying just to think about.
Right. The engine isn't just propelling you forward, it's your lifeline. It's your balancing pole. So break down exactly what that Honda 4-stroke engine was doing beneath him.
Okay, so to understand the 4-stroke in trials, you have to look at how it delivers power. A 4-stroke engine, by its mechanical nature, only fires on every other revolution of the crankshaft.
Okay, so there's a gap in the power delivery.
Yes. You have the intake stroke, the compression stroke, the combustion or power stroke, and then the exhaust stroke.
Got it.
Because that power delivery is spaced out, it inherently creates a very tractable, predictable form of traction.
So it's not just spinning wildly.
Right. When you crack the throttle on a wet rock, a 4-stroke finds grip mechanically. It wants to dig in and pull.
It's calculated. It's almost mathematical in how it finds traction, right?
Precisely. It allows for an incredibly methodical, disciplined approach to navigating a section.
Okay, so if you're a rider who thrives on precision
and planning and absolute repeatable control, the 4-stroke is the ultimate weapon. It rewards a cool head. Right. And under the guidance of the absolute champion at Honda, Jaime was mastering this. I mean, he was learning how to be a surgeon with the bike.
But here's where I have to push back.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's the exact same pushback the entire motorsport world had in 2018.
Oh, the paddock was in shock.
Because think about it. If you are a young rider and you have secured a spot on the most elite, well-funded team on the planet,
the absolute peak,
and you are learning directly from the absolute champion, and you have a machine that provides unparalleled predictable traction, Isn't abandoning all that just to quote-unquote feel the bike a bit differently incredibly arrogant?
It looks like pure hubris from the outside.
I mean, with sponsorships and millions of dollars in the line, walking away from Repsol Honda seems like total career suicide.
Was it actually a massive mistake at the time? From a purely logistical and financial standpoint, absolutely it looked like madness. Why walk away from the throne room?
Right, it makes no sense on paper.
But the reality was that the precise, calculated nature of the four-stroke was fundamentally incompatible with Jaime's internal wiring.
It didn't fit his Anima.
Exactly. He wasn't a surgeon, he was a brawler. The discipline of the four-stroke was acting like a cage for his natural wildness.
Okay, so it's sort of like, imagine recruiting a raw generational rock and roll guitarist who plays purely by feel, right?
I like this.
And you force him into an elite classical orchestra. You hand him a perfectly tuned, state-of-the-art instrument, you teach him to sight-read strict tempo, and sure, he becomes technically flawless.
He gets all the right notes.
Exactly. But there's no acoustic feedback. He can't feel the grit. He can't feel the vibration against his ribs. The music is perfect, but the musician is slowly suffocating.
That is exactly the dynamic. That is such a good analogy. Jaime craved a direct, visceral, analog response that the four-stroke simply wasn't designed to give him.
He wanted the grit.
He didn't want the engine to smooth out his mistakes. He wanted an engine that would snap, snarl, and react instantly to his aggression.
And in the engineering world of trials, if you want explosive, instantaneous, raw power to launch you up a vertical rock face,
You need a two-stroke.
because a two-stroke fires on every single revolution of the crankshaft.
Exactly. It compresses the intake, combustion, and exhaust into a much tighter, volatile cycle.
It's just inherently more aggressive.
It is lighter, it revs faster, and the power delivery is chaotic. It requires the rider to be constantly managing the chaos, essentially dancing with the machine rather than just piloting it.
And Jaime realized he needed that chaos.
He did. He needed to find what the text calls SINCRO, a deep cellular synchronicity with the engine.
SINCRO.
Right. So in 2018, he takes the leap. He leaves Honda, leaves the safety of the four-stroke, and initiates his first return to GASGAS to find a two-stroke that actually matches his heartbeat.
But this is where the story takes a massive, really unexpected turn. Because leaving Honda was just the first step into the wilderness.
It was only the beginning.
Right, he knew he wanted a two-stroke analog feel. But the entire motorsport industry was moving in the exact opposite direction.
The digital seduction.
Yes. Everyone was becoming obsessed with modern, data-driven technology. And this collision course leads them straight to Vertigo.
The Vertigo era is fascinating because it represents the ultimate clash. Vertigo wasn't just building traditional motorcycles, they were building the future.
Spearheaded by legendary figures like Dougie Lampkin.
Exactly. These machines were exceptionally modern. We're talking incredibly lightweight, high-rigidity frames designed to perfectly distribute impact.
But the crown jewel of the Vertigo philosophy, the thing that was supposed to revolutionize the sport, was EFI.
Electronic fuel injection.
Yes. We need to unpack EFI, because this is the absolute crux of Jaime's entire 7-year struggle.
It is the villain of his specific story.
Right. Up until this point, trials bikes largely relied on carburetors. Now, a carburetor is purely physical, right?
Completely mechanical.
It's literally just a tube utilizing the Venturi effect. The engine's piston goes down, it creates a physical vacuum. That vacuum sucks air through the tube, and the air physically pulls a mist of fuel into the engine.
Yeah, there's no thinking involved.
It is mechanical, instantaneous, and completely dependent on atmospheric pressure and the rider's wrist.
Yes, it is beautifully primitive, but from an engineering standpoint, you have to admit, it is also imprecise.
Because it can't adapt.
Right. A carburetor can run rich if you go up in altitude. It can run lean if the temperature drops. So Vertigo and the modern racing world asked, why rely on a primitive vacuum when we have computer chips?
Enter the EFI.
EFI changes the entire paradigm. It replaces that mechanical suction with a digital ECU, an engine control unit.
And this ECU is pulling in massive amounts of data in real time, right?
Exactly. The EFI system has sensors everywhere. It's measuring the exact ambient air temperature, the barometric pressure, the engine coolant temperature, the RPMs, and precisely how far the rider has twisted the throttle.
Okay, so it's a ton of variables.
A ton. And the computer takes all of those data points, runs them through an algorithm, and calculates in milliseconds the absolute mathematically perfect spray of fuel to inject directly into the cylinder.
So by all objective logical standards, EFI is superior.
It's flawed.
It guarantees that the engine is running at peak optimization, perfectly tuned to the environment no matter what rock you are climbing or what altitude you are at. It is the triumph of data over guesswork.
And look, Jaime knew this. He didn't just stubbornly ignore the technology. During his time at Vertigo, he actively grappled with it.
He really tried to make it work.
He spent countless hours trying to integrate this state-of-the-art, data-driven logic into his own concept of SINCRO. He tried to force his internal wildness to sync up with the ECU's algorithm.
But it failed.
It completely failed.
And it failed for a reason that genuinely gives me goosebumps, because it touches on something deeply profound about human intuition. The promise of digital perfection fundamentally clashed with Jaime's specific, unique genius.
We are talking about the Anima.
The soul.
Exactly. To understand why EFI failed him, we have to look closely at the concept of what we'll call microlag.
Okay, microlag. Break that down.
When we say the ECU calculates the fuel spray in milliseconds, to you and me, driving a car to the grocery store, that seems instantaneous.
Right, I'd never notice it.
But when you are balancing on the absolute knife edge of a jagged rock face, teetering between a clean section and a devastating 15-foot fall backwards, a 10-millisecond delay for a computer chip to process air density is a lifetime.
It's the difference between gripping the rock and just plummeting.
Exactly. Because Jaime's connection to the machine is precognitive. His genius is deeply cellular.
Cellular, I love that word for this.
His fingertips are literally feeling the intake of the carburetor, feeling the traction of the rear tire before his conscious brain even registers it.
So his body is reacting faster than his thoughts.
Yes. When he was on a carbureted bike, the moment his wrist moved, the physical vacuum happened instantaneously. There was zero translation required.
But the EFI introduced a translator.
Yes, that's it exactly. And the EFI system essentially says, hold on, Jaime. Let me calculate the optimal fuel ratio for that throttle input before I give you the power.
Wow. Let me check the math first.
Right. And that microprocessing time, that tiny digital hesitation, was severing his anima from the engine. The technology that was supposed to optimize him was actually getting in the way of his central nervous system.
It's incredible. He didn't need a translator because he speaks the native language of the machine.
Exactly.
The sensors couldn't replicate the shivering of the anima, that absolute pure unity he had felt with a beta machine back when he was a 16-year-old kid.
That's where it all started.
He tasted that analog perfection as a teenager. And this entire Vertigo era proved to him that no amount of data, no amount of algorithmic perfection could replace that raw, mechanical vacuum of a carburetor.
It's a brilliant realization of what we might call his analog genius. He figured out that his form of SINCRO was so highly concentrated, so purely physical, that electronic assistance wasn't assisting him at all.
It was literally slowing him down.
It was dulling the blade of his intuition. He realized that for him, the data was just noise.
So having rejected the absolute pinnacle of motorsport discipline at Honda, and having now rejected the absolute cutting edge of digital technology at Vertigo.
He's running out of options.
Right. Jaime has to prove that his analog theory actually works. He has to prove he isn't just a romantic clinging to old technology, but a lethal competitor.
And he does.
Which brings us to the most triumphant and subsequently the most devastating chapter of his Odyssey, 2023 to 2025.
He makes the pivot back to familiar ground.
Returning to GASGAS.
Returning to GASGAS in 2023. He secures his two-stroke machine, he gets his carburetor, he strips away the digital interference, and he just goes to war.
And the results?
They speak for themselves. By 2023, the entire global trials community recognizes what is happening. Jaime Busto establishes himself as the sole definitive threat to the absolute champion's throne.
He validates everything.
Every single decision.
He proves that his internal wildness, his rejection of the four-stroke cage, and his reliance on cellular SINCRO wasn't arrogance. It was the exact recipe required to build Giant Killer.
He climbs to the absolute summit of the sport.
He is teetering right on the edge of taking the crown. He has seemingly figured the entire puzzle out.
But proving his analog theory came with a hidden cost he couldn't have possibly anticipated.
The twist.
Right. Just as he perfects his ride, just as he syncs up entirely with the GASGAS machine, the ground completely falls out from under him.
The strategic shock of 2025. This is the moment that tests not just the rider, but the man himself.
It was unprecedented.
We were talking about a massive wave of structural change rocking the entire motorsport world. Out of nowhere, due to a severe strategic shift by the parent company, GASGAS completely ceases its factory trials operations.
The manufacturer just shuts down. Gone.
I want to make sure you, the listener, understand how massive this is in the paddock. A factory rider at this level relies on a massive, intricate infrastructure.
Oh, it's a small army.
Right. You have your personal mechanic, you have suspension engineers, you have an R&D department constantly tweaking frame geometry.
Logistics teams moving your multi-million-dollar setup across the globe.
Yes. And in one corporate boardroom decision, all of that vanishes into thin air.
Imagine being an athlete in that position. You just spent years wandering the wilderness, taking massive risks, leaving Honda, fighting with EFI at Vertigo.
You finally build the perfect weapon at GASGAS.
You finally become the #1 contender.
And then the corporation pulls the plug. For 99% of athletes, having your manufacturer shut down right as you peak would be career-ending devastation.
They would ruin you.
You'd be scrambling, panicking, taking whatever subpar contract you could find just to stay in the paddock. You'd be grieving the loss of your peak years.
But the reaction from Jaime is what elevates the story to the level of myth. Despite the sudden collapse of his entire racing infrastructure, those closest to him noted that his mind remained curiously clear.
Curiously clear.
There was no panic. There was no frantic scrambling.
How is that possible? How do you remain clear when your entire world collapses?
Because that clarity wasn't born out of denial. It was the ultimate enlightenment of his 7-year odyssey.
The payoff for the wandering.
Exactly. Think about what those years of seeking and strife had actually done to him. By wandering from the calculated discipline of Honda to the digital perfection of Vertigo and finding validation at GASGAS, he had systematically stripped away every single illusion in the sport.
He had tested every variable.
He had. If he had stayed at Honda forever, he would have always wondered if he was missing his true potential.
He would have wondered about the wildness.
Right. If he had never tried Vertigo's EFI, he might have always secretly feared that the data-driven riders would eventually leave him behind.
That the algorithms were better.
Exactly. But because he had lived through the extremes of both discipline and technology, he possessed a newfound, unshakable certainty about exactly who he was and exactly what he needed.
The collapse of GASGAS proved to him that the corporate machinery, the massive budgets, the massive R&D teams, none of that is the core of the sport.
None of it.
He realized he didn't need the latest electronic devices or massive capital. He just needed what the text calls a blueprint of passion.
A blueprint of passion.
He needed a motorcycle that would synchronize with his will without the slightest deviation. No EFI translation lag.
No four-stroke calculated cages.
Just pure, unadulterated execution of his physical commands.
And standing in the ashes of the GASGAS factory effort, he was finally free to ask the ultimate question, a question he had been circling ever since he was a teenager.
What was it?
Is it not time at last to return to the place where that Anima resides?
The Anima. The soul. He realizes that the collapse of GASGAS wasn't a tragedy. It was a release valve.
It freed him.
It freed him to finally go back to the feeling he had when he was 16 years old. It cleared the board so he could make the one move he was always destined to make.
Which brings us to the climax of this entire journey.
March 20, 2026. The inevitable homecoming.
The clock of destiny begins to tick once more. The official call comes from Beta.
And it is vital to understand that the paddock did not view this as a standard contract negotiation, did they?
Oh no, this wasn't a free agent shopping around for the highest bidder. The phrase used again and again is an inevitable homecoming.
Inevitable. It implies that gravity itself was pulling Jaime and Beta back together.
Like it was predestined.
The wandering had to happen. The 7 years of strife were a necessary crucible so that this return could be fully realized.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the specific machine that was waiting for him at Beta. We're calling it the Beta SINCRO.
Yes, the Beta SINCRO.
Because you have to understand, Beta didn't just hand him a standard production bike off the showroom floor. The machine waiting for him in March 2026 was designed specifically to bridge the gap of his lost years.
It was the ultimate analog weapon.
I love how we're talking about this dirt bike like it's Excalibur waiting in the stone.
But mechanically, it really is. Beta understood exactly what he had been searching for.
They watched his whole journey.
They watched him reject the EFI at Vertigo. They knew he craved the instantaneous physical vacuum of the carburetor.
They understood that he didn't want sensors interfering with his rear wheel traction.
So they built a chassis and tuned an engine that wasn't just a vehicle, but a literal vessel for his specific cellular anima.
It is the physical manifestation of his original style. When Jaime finally swings a leg over this beta machine, it is the culmination of a decade of professional hardship.
The wandering is over.
The Basque genius has finally ended his long wandering. He has arrived back at his own true style, but, and this is crucial, it's not the raw, unrefined style of the 16-year-old kid anymore.
Exactly. Because the 16-year-old kid had the Anima, but he didn't have the discipline.
He didn't have the Honda Forge.
Right, because he spent 7 years wandering. Because he allowed Repsol Honda to forge his tactical discipline. Because he tested and definitively rejected the digital lag of Vertigo. Because he proved his absolute lethal threat level at GASGAS.
He is now stepping onto the beta as a fully realized master.
The metaphor we keep coming back to is the blade.
The blade of SINCRO.
When Jaime grips the handlebars of the beta SINCRO, he is wielding a blade that is sharper and deeper than ever before.
Think about what a blade represents in this context.
Okay.
A blade requires immense precision to use effectively, yes, but it is ultimately a primitive analog tool.
Right. It doesn't have a microchip to correct your angle.
It doesn't have a sensor to tell you how hard to swing. It relies entirely, 100%, on the skill, the intuition, and the cellular feeling of the person holding it.
The blade is an extension of the wielder's arm. And that is what the beta is to Jaime Busto. It is a direct, uninterrupted extension of his central nervous system.
If we synthesize this entire 7-year journey, we're witnessing the creation of the most dangerous, fully realized rider in the history of the sport.
The perfect synthesis.
He possesses the methodical, calculated discipline of a 4-stroke champion, but he retains the explosive, chaotic soul of a 2-stroke wildman.
He has the strategic clarity of a veteran who has survived corporate collapse.
And he is now mounted on an analog machine built specifically to harmonize with his deepest instincts. It is the perfect fusion of man and machine. It is absolute synchro.
It fundamentally forces you to reconsider the entire modern narrative of progress, doesn't it?
It really does.
We are constantly hammered with the idea that the newest technology is the mandatory next step. That if you don't adopt the data analysis, if you don't embrace the EFI, if you don't let the algorithm optimize you, you will inevitably be left behind in the dust.
Adapt or die.
Right, adapt or die. That is the mantra of the 21st century.
But Jaime Busto's entire career proves that sometimes the data is just noise.
Sometimes adapting to the new technology means actively sacrificing the very thing that made you great in the first place.
His 7-year odyssey is a profound testament to the courage it takes to stand in front of the entire industry and say, no, this state-of-the-art logic does not serve my soul. It is making me worse.
His retreat from modern digital perfection was the only possible way for him to find his true edge. The blade of SINCRO could only be forged by rejecting the data and embracing the pure mechanical truth of his original style.
And that is exactly what we want you, listening right now, to take away from this.
Yeah, how does this apply to you?
We started this deep dive talking about the engineers in the paddock, obsessed with telemetry and millisecond optimization. But look at your own life. We live in a world that is completely obsessed with data.
We track our sleep cycles with lasers on our wrists.
We track our daily steps. We use productivity apps that measure our output in precise increments.
We have algorithms telling us what media to consume, what optimal route to drive, and how to structure our workdays.
We are entirely surrounded by our own versions of EFI systems technologies that promise to eliminate friction and optimize our behavior.
We are constantly being told to let the ECU calculate our lives.
Precisely. But Jaime's story raises a vital question for you to consider in your own career or your own creative pursuits.
And what is that?
What is your carburetor? Oh, I love that. What is your carburetor? Where is that area in your life where you have a purely intuitive, almost cellular understanding of what you were doing? A place where you don't need the data to tell you you're doing it right because you can feel the vibration in your ribs.
The thing you just know in your bones.
Right. And more importantly, where are you letting data override that pure, intuitive anima?
Are you trying to force your own wildness, your own unique genius into a spreadsheet just because everyone else says it's the optimal way to do things?
Are you letting an algorithm dictate your path when your gut knows a far better, albeit rockier way?
Are you suffering from microlag because you're waiting for the data to validate a decision your cells already made?
That's the danger.
Maybe it's time for you to reject the perfect, calculated digital route. Maybe it's time to stop wandering through the sterile paddocks of optimization and orchestrate your own inevitable homecoming to your original style.
It's a terrifying leap to make.
It is, but as Jaime Busto proved on March 20th, 2026, it is the only way to truly sharpen your blade.
Something to think about the next time you feel the urge to check the data before trusting your gut.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the incredible analog odyssey of Jaime Busto. We'll catch you next time.
Listen. 2018, the choice is made. Leaving a Honda, leave the four-stroke shade. I need the wildness, I need the raw response. Jaime Busto, back on the hunt. Back to the two-stroke, snapping the lead. Analog craved, that is the creed. Vertigo logic, EFI and the data. Modern approach, but the soul comes later. Dougie Lampkin, helping the fight. But something is missing in the middle of the night. Feeling the carb intake long before sensors can even awake. Cells in my body sensing the ground. The shivering soul is the only sound. 2023, I'm the king in the wave, threatening the throne of the Tony Boasting. When the Anima screams, I'm here Busto, fulfilling the dreams. Back to the rhythm, back to the start. Structural change 2025. Gas gone, but I'm still alive. Strategic shift, parent company games, but my mind is clear among the flames. Time to return to the Anima home. No more wandering, no more to roam. March 2020, 26. Destiny calling, getting the fix. Official call, maker on the line. No mere transfer, it is a design. Inevitable homecoming, bridging the gap. Vast genius, putting SINCRO on the map. The Odyssey ends in the baker light. Grip the blade and win the fight. SINCRO rain. Trees spell found through the joy and the pain. SINCRO, analog. Listen, 2018, the choice is made. Leaving the Honda, leave the four-stroke shade. I need the wildness, I need the raw response. Jaime Busto! Back on the hunt. Back to the two-stroke, snapping the lead. Analog craving, that is the creed. Vertigo, logic, key, and the data. Modern approach, but the soul comes later. Dougie Lampkin, helping the fight. But something is missing in the middle of the night. SINCRO, analog hard. positive feel in the carbon take. Long before senses can even awake. Cells in my body sensing the ground. The shivering soul is the only sound. 2023, I'm the king in the weight. Reigning in the throne of the Tony Bo state. SINCRO, SINCRO. Jaime Busto, fulfilling the dream. Back to the rhythm, back to the start. Hey, back to the start. Back to the rhythm, back to the start. Hey, back to the start. Hey, 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 back to the start. Hey, 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 back to the start. Hey, hey, back to the start. Structural change, 2025. Gas gone, but I'm still alive. Strategic shift, parent company grains, but my mind is clear among those flames. Time to return to the Anima home. No more wandering, no more to roam. Hey, hey, March 20, 2026. Destiny